Good morning.
Good morning. It's September 12th, 2021.
I wonder what day it was.
And our topic today is Transcend and Include. So as I was thinking about this topic, it can be very broad with what you include. But before we get into that, I'd like to start by reading a prayer and a writing by Ernest Holmes, our founder, from the book 361. It's entitled, I recognize that my unity with all humankind is of divine origin. And the Bible quote is John 15:5. I am the vine, you are the branches. And Ernest says, I believe there's but one spirit in which everyone lives, moves, and has his being. In this spirit, I am directly unified with all people. I recognize this spirit as individualized in everyone. Therefore, I'm learning to see every person I meet in the light of this divine and changeless truth. There is one spirit diffused through all humanity. With this spirit in everyone, I hold communion. In a hand clasp, I feel its warmth and color. In the exchange of thought, I feel the presence and the activity of the divine mind. In the blessing of friendship, I sense its love. I am separated from none, united with all, and one with the eternal light itself. As I go among people, I know that the presence of pure spirit within me, which I recognize, blesses everyone I meet, tends to heal everything I touch, brings gladness into the life of everyone I contact. Therefore, I am a blessing to myself, to humankind, and to every day in which I live. And so it
That's
is.
beautiful.
Yes, it is. And Bob and I were talking about, well, first of all, I'd like to tell you about it as I thought about it and looked up various quotes. When we talk about include, we're talking about including a lot of things. We're including our own past. We're including the wisdom gained for our own past. And we are including the other. You know, there's me and then there's the other. Sometimes a spouse is included as part of the me, we are the we, and then everybody else becomes the other. And so we have to look at how we do that division. And we know spiritually there is no division. And, you know, with that last reading that I read, I noticed that with the general public, I can do that and feel that. And it's easy to do with people you don't know and don't know anything about. You can love them generally as people. When Bob and I were discussing this morning, where it gets really tough is with people in your life that you know very well who annoy you. And how do you deal with that when they just annoy you? And
Well, you blocked them from your Facebook page, that's for sure. Yeah. And then,
first thing you do is you block them from
yeah,
your
and then
social
say
media.
snide, sarcastic things, and oh, that's not what we're supposed to do today, is it?
No, and it doesn't fit with what we believe spiritually.
Oh, that's
And
right.
so we're going to talk about the challenges with that. But first, I want to share this beautiful definition of God that's written by Saint Bonaventure. And you've heard part of this before because a lot of people quote this because it kind of says it all. God is the one whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. God is all inclusive, the essence of everything, within all things, but not enclosed, outside all things, but not excluded, above all things, but not aloof, below all things, but not debased. God is all in all. From her, through him, and in her is all power, presence, and essence. That's by Saint Bonaventure. And I'm sure some modern day writer added the alternative him and her in there. So we know spiritually that's the truth, that we're in God, of God, and God does not exclude anyone, anything. And so that then becomes our goal. How do we not exclude others? You know how when you're annoyed with someone, you don't even want to talk to them. You might even know you need to call them or talk to them, but you just don't want to because you're so busy entertaining what they last said or did that annoyed you? How do you get past that? Um, and do you want to jump into that?
No, I was just letting you do the whole talk, and then I can be irritated about that, and we
Yeah,
can talk
very
later.
annoyed, very
Actually,
annoyed. Yeah,
I
and
won't be annoyed.
exclude me.
I just won't talk to
You
you the
won't
rest
talk
of
to
the
me.
day, and I'll say, and if
Yeah.
you ask me what's wrong, I'll say nothing. Everything is fine.
What do we call that in couples therapy? There's a
Passive
word for
aggressive,
that.
but
Yes, it's also take yourself away.
yeah.
I
To
think
take
that came from us.
right. Well,
You
the great
take
takeaway
yourself
game, which is
away.
out,
Yes.
and actually that's a good place to start, because what we often do is we do take ourselves away from any situation that upsets us, and hope, and we have the power of removal as opposed to the power of inclusion. And what I wanted to say first off about people that irritate us is stop it. Uh, Whatever it is you're doing, stop doing that because it's irritating. But the other thing that's probably more relevant to say is when I'm irritated by a particular behavior or conversation or an event, what really seems to be helpful for me anyway is to take a step back and see a larger picture of that person, and take a further step back and a further step back. And uh, as I take steps further back, I see that person not only as a person having a conversation with me, but I see them in their cultural world. I see them in their social world. I see them in their family world. I see them in the world that I live in as well. The things that we have to struggle with, I have to struggle with. And as I take steps further back, I see a whole person rather than somebody or a situation to object to. And so we've spent a lot of time in a lot of our talks talking about getting closer, embracing the intimacy of a single moment. And today I'm talking about what looks like just the opposite, which is to take further and further steps back until you can see the whole person. If you can't step back far enough to see the whole person, your vision is in trouble, not that person. That person's behavior isn't the problem any longer, because you have had to write them off so entirely that in your mind they fail to exist. And that's a problem that you're having, not a problem that they're making. We noticed this, and Judith brought it up earlier, and it was fascinating to me. In our swimming pool, we have a multicultural swimming pool, and we have people who speak Spanish, French, German,
Brazilian,
Brazilian, Yiddish,
Russian.
Russian. Yeah, Russian. We have every language you can imagine in a swimming pool. What's interesting is that everybody in the pool is nearly naked. And that nakedness and that proximity seems to generate an environment for conversation. And that environment for conversation then allows us to just to see a small part of the person and then envision a larger person. And as they share their histories or they share their stories, and you start to expand your idea of who they are, you get to see more and more and more. And it's more difficult when you're doing that to write people off. And so a formula in my mind is, if I can't stand what I'm seeing, take a step back until I can see enough that I can stand, and that I can stand with what I'm seeing. And the other piece of that is, and this is something that I learned, and Judith learned too, as counselors, when we would do marriage counseling, the one sure sign that a marriage wasn't going to work was when one or the other person or both people had lost respect for the other. And that having respect for their humanity, having respect for who they are, having respect for the struggles that they've had, having respect for the person that's showing up, is so central to inclusion. And if you don't respect, then in essence, what you are doing is approaching each and everything they do with disrespect. And how can disrespect ever engender inclusion? And so I just wanted to bring it up as a part of our struggle, because I think when we hear things like, you need to include people, you need to be kind and loving, you need to be generous and understanding, and you're thinking, yeah, that's just fine for you, but I got so-and-so next door to me who's an irritating pain in the neck. And then we feel guilty or we feel ashamed, but we need tools. And the first tool that I think is important is, like I said, take a step back from the situation and try to see the person in a larger and larger picture. And before I go on too long, I want to add one more thing. When I was working at Broward Hospital, I got to cover the desk one day, and a very tall, not very well kept, angry Black man came to the desk and said, "Give me a damn pass," and threw his keys down on the desk. And I looked at him, and he was angry and aggressive and hostile, all of the things that I least value in life. And so I stood up, so I could meet him face to face, eye to eye, took the keys out of my pocket, threw them on the desk, and I said, "Where do you want to go from here?" And he just laughed. And I said, "Let me give you a pass." And I gave him a pass, but then I said, "So what's going on? Because that's just not how we greet people." He said, "My father's upstairs dying. My brother was murdered last month." And he listed all the people in the last month that are in some sort of tragic situation, including his own. I said, "Wow, I can't imagine that you're not a lot more angry than you seemed today when you came in." And he said, "I actually am. It just doesn't show." And he left, went up to see his father, came back down. And when he came down, he came up to the desk and he said, "If you have some time, would you mind going up to see my father and doing a prayer for him?" And I thought, wow, I was so irritated by his initial presentation that all I wanted to do was let him know what a pain in the neck he was. But within the seconds after that, I thought I have to match this with some sort of action that says, "I stand with you, even if it's in anger, until we can do something different." And I had to take a step back from my dislike of the situation, my disrespect for the way he presented, and all of that, and embrace. And I think in that experience is the formula for getting along with people. Well, anyway, he came back and I saw him probably 3 or 4 more times before his father died. And every time he would come in, he would ask for me and go looking for me.
So uh, that's a wonderful true story, and I love it when we can transcend our own experience and go to that truth space, especially with neighbors or strangers. Where I think it gets trickiest is with our own loved ones, our own family members or extended family members
It's so hard to block them.
that we know so well, and we know their story, and they still annoy us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that that becomes even harder to to stop this taking ourselves away
Right.
from them as a way of punishment for whatever they've done that's displeased us, because that is not transcending an inclusion. See, when we transcend this plane, when we uh, ascend spiritually, we need to take everybody with us, and we cannot exclude others. I want to read another quote that's about how all of life works this way. And this is by Ken Wilber. We don't know Ken Wilber. He's a very brilliant scientific and spiritual leader. And he says, every new level of complexity both transcends the limitations of the earlier level and includes the less complex structure into itself. Molecules transcend and include atoms. Tissues transcend and include molecules. Organs transcend and include tissues. Ecosystems transcend and include organisms and their environment, and so on. And so it is also with us as we attempt our own spiritual growth and want to become more, we have to transcend this exclusion of others. Now, I think Bob's tip about standing back and getting an overview works especially great with strangers. You can first find yourself being judgmental and then go imagining what their circumstances are and going back and back and now I understand. But with our own loved ones, we know already all of that. And so how else do we deal with it? One of the things that I think is brilliant to do when you don't know what else to do is pray for them.
Mhm.
But in particular, we love this Hawaiian prayer of Ho'oponopono. And this is a prayer that you can do for anyone. And it is an ancient Hawaiian practice. And a man who was working in a criminally
I think it was a psychiatrist.
prison for the criminally insane. I believe he was a psychiatrist. Would sit up in his office and pray over the name of each incarcerated person daily with this prayer.
What does it mean?
And what the prayer is a 5-step process, I believe, and it goes. I know you do it every day for your
Close, but let's
patients.
see if I get
Let's
it
see
right.
if I got it right. Um, it starts with the name of the person. I love you. Please forgive me.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry comes before that.
Yeah.
I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And then what?
Well, the way I do it, and it probably isn't the way it's, and all of you will
You can look this up, by the
look
way, on
this up and
YouTube.
tell us, right? I give the name of the person and say, I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Mhm.
I love you. Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
And
And
so,
you see that person in your mind's eye and you see them having the life that they want. When he did this, within something like 8 months, the unit that had been full to capacity with lots and lots of violence, the violence started to diminish almost immediately. And shortly after the violence began to diminish, the patients then started getting better and were either transferred to less threatening units or where there was less worry about their violence, and or they were discharged altogether. And I'm now working in a facility that's actually very similar to that. And because of the chronicity of the patients that I'm working with and the likelihood that they're not going to be going home anytime soon or to a place that will be called home, I've been doing this every day. And I found something that I discovered when I did it. I am doing this to help them, but it's helping me.
yeah,
And I want,
that was my point.
yeah, and I want to bring up along with that is if you're working on inclusion, you're working on the wrong thing. We don't work on including people because it's an arrogant place to come from. We work on being as authentic and as real as we can with that person and connecting in as real a way as we can. And I would add to that, and this is in response to the whole business of family, imagine that this person is going to be in your life for the rest of your life, and you need to make it work. And if you imagine that each person that you're having trouble with is going to be a permanent fixture in your life for the rest of your life, and you've got to make it work, it changes how you approach it. Because one of the things that we do is we secretly keep pretending to take ourselves away. And when we play the secret game of, I'll take away myself, I won't interact, I won't answer the phone, I won't deal with this person. When we play takeaway, even mentally, and don't actually do it, we've taken away the opportunity to solve the problem, which is how can I be with this person in a way that works?
Yeah, so when you first do this and when you first hear about it, it's like, oh my gosh, what do you mean I forgive you? You're the one who's, you know, uh, harmed someone else or hurt someone else. That's why you're here in the instance of the man in Hawaii or whatever they've done. You said, what do you mean? Please forgive me. And if you need to understand that, just say, please forgive me for my judgments about you.
Mhm.
Um, I held you in this box, and I know you're really far more than that.
But in a greater way, what it really is saying is I'm erasing the artificial boundaries that we say separate us. And I am speaking as you, as one. We are really one.
Right.
When I say please forgive me, I mean me, you, and all that we are that has participated in harming or bringing harm to me, you, and anyone else.
Mhm.
And so its nature is inclusive. Its nature is to say you and I are
Right.
one, and I can
And I
speak,
love you.
and I love you, and I can speak to me, and I can speak to you, and I can speak in one word.
Yeah. So I think that's just a profound
Yeah, I
practice.
got to start doing it with some of your relatives. They're all wonderful.
They're
Yeah,
wonderful, and they're very much in our lives, and
yes,
I like it that way.
yeah,
And he's getting used to it.
yeah. I just whenever they talk, I say no, 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 no. That's all. That works.
Uh, so in addition to including others, we need to include our own past. And the lessons we've learned, the hardships we've gone through. So when we ascend the mountain, that's a metaphor for spiritual growth. And we don't do it by leaving our past behind and acting like that never happened. This is from Richard Rohr. Now, Richard Rohr is a monk, a Catholic monk, and he's written several bestsellers. This is from Loving the Two Halves of Lives and of life. And he says that the first half of life is our survival dance. The second half of life can then become our sacred dance. Money, status symbols, and security are of limited value, but to the soul, they are a distraction. And finally, they become the very problem itself. But you've got to go through this first half of life and its concerns. Every level of growth builds on the previous ones. The principle is this: transcendence means including the previous stages. Then you can see the limited but real value of the early stages. But if you will no longer put too much energy onto just looking good, making money, feeling secure at all costs, and making sure you're right and others are wrong. I don't know if I read that right, but he says, but you will no longer put too much energy on those things. That's what it means to grow up.
Now, the dilemma with that, and I say the dilemma with that, is it reminded me of Kubler-Ross's Death of Dying, the stages of grief. And that is, you think you're going to go through each stage separately, and when it's done, the next stage will appear. But what you notice with grief is that you go through depression, and then bargaining, and then anger, and then back to depression, and then a little bit more bargaining, and a little bit more acceptance, and then it's back and forth and back and forth. What he's talking about with these two stages of life that are important is that stage one, which is acquisition of control, power, children, family, all of that stuff. Actually, we don't get done with that. Many of us, and I know myself at the age of whatever, I'm still working a full-time job in that world, paying my bills and doing everything I did for survival on stage one. At the same time, I am probably more involved in my spiritual journey at a deeper level than I've ever been before. And so the dance that we're having to do, and many of us are having to do this at a much older age than we thought we would, is not to get over stage one, but to integrate that past into the present and use that. Now, for me, taking the things that I've learned from the past jobs that I've had and applying them to the one that I have now is a way to begin to integrate that experience of how does the past become something of value rather than something that you thought you were going to get over. And so you're really talking about the integration process of the past so that it's useful. And if you think about some of the wisest people you know, they haven't forgotten their past, they've integrated it. They have begun to use it in a way that you can then learn from and value as well.
Exactly. So I would just like to close with a couple of ideas. We just had the anniversary of 9
11.
11 yesterday, 20 years. And, there's some quotes from some very interesting people about that. Jeff Parnas was, well, let's see, he was an investor in new software. And so, and his partner was killed on that day. So here he is, a big entrepreneur. And he was more impressed with what happened the day after 9/11. This is what he has to say. When we lend a hand to one another, nothing is impossible. We're not about what happened on 9/11. We're about what happened on 9/12. And so when we think about what happened, I remember being astonished because my perception of New York City, and having been there a few times as a tourist, was that it was one of the rudest. People were the rudest I had ever seen them. They ignored one another. They didn't speak to one another. And it just seemed like a real dog eat dog kind of environment that I didn't like at all coming from the South. Um, and that day, I was so impressed. The day after, rather, boy, people came together. They were doing everything they could to help each other, to save each other. And it just brought out the heart of New York City,
Mhm.
of really caring for one another. And that's what he's talking about. He ended up starting a foundation. I can't find it right now, but but bring out the the friendliness and helpfulness all over the world.
Well, and to survive in New York, a lot of New Yorkers have developed an outer shell that is hard, but
Mhm.
there is a core that is soft and caring. And if you get to know New Yorkers, you find out that there's more community and more connection than you ever would have suspected. But it's often well protected and by what appears to be a shield.
Well, and it's the epitome of a place where there is the other, they have
Yeah,
so many
yeah.
different cultures and languages, and there is a tendency to kind of live together in the beginning before they integrate. And so it's the epitome of what can devolve into us versus them. Here, I found this on Jeff Barnes. Jeff Parness. His business partner and friend was one of the thousands that were killed in the attack. And he says 9/11 changed us all forever, but 9/12 changed us just as much. That outpouring of kindness and generosity to me was more powerful than the terror that happened the day before. So he wanted to be a bigger part of that outpouring of kindness. And he started a foundation called New York Says Thank You.
That's so powerful an example, though, of exactly what this talk is about, though, which is integrating the past into the present and in the future.
Exactly.
Until we can see the past in a way that allows us to recognize our values and our strengths and our capacity, then it's just the past.
Right. And I want to close by acknowledging for our Jewish friends that Wednesday is Yom Kippur. That is their high holy day for the year. And it completes the annual period known in Judaism as the high holy days. And one woman, Sarah Gutfreund, the way you would pronounce it in German, says this: think of Yom Kippur as the lookout from the top of a mountain that you've been climbing all year. See your days and their moments spread out before you. And be willing to look now at this big picture of your life, your ultimate goals, your beliefs. See each person in your life as part of that picture. What lesson have they taught you, even if you had to learn it through pain? What message is God sending you by putting this person in your life? That's by Sarah Gutfreund.
She's really talking about taking a step back.
Yeah, she
Just
is.
to see the bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger picture.
And it's called the Day of Atonement because that's also a day, and it would do us all a good to do this, where you actually look at your actions the past year. And is there anything that you need to make amends for or to atone
I
for?
doubt it.
Because that also is a fantastic way of
Yeah.
including
Yeah.
people that may have excluded you or you may have excluded them.
Well, and all of what we said could equally apply to you. When you can't stand you anymore, take a step back from you and look at it
It's true.
and look at you in a bigger way. When you can't stand the things that you've done, take a step back and ask yourself, what was the context for this? What was the environment that I was dealing with or living in? I look back at some of my actions and I think, oh my God, how could I do that? And it was the 70s. You know? The context does help a little bit because everybody was doing things in the 70s that none of us do
We
now
don't do
or
now,
even want
yeah.
to admit to. If it wasn't for context, I don't know if I could survive my past. But so,
true.
but integrating that past and saying taking a step back and looking at yourself and whatever the negativity is, what were the conditions? What was I dealing with? Was I not doing the best I could? And can I then come to some acceptance of me? And as you do that, you then are able to accept that you see in other people as well.
Exactly.
So we're going to close this part of it and we're going to go to our music, which we'd love
But
to have
first
you.
we're going to end with a prayer.
That's of course what we're going to do. And thank God we do this together.
Would you like to do it with me?
Sure,
Okay.
I may. I'm gonna see how it goes.
Okay. So we
Yes.
give great thanks that we have discovered this path to spiritual awareness.
And we love that we're able to look inside and outside at the same time, that we're able to see the inner fabric of our own experience and the inner fabric of that which other people present to us, that we're able to see the outside and not judge it because we know that deep within each person, there is a heart, a soul, and a kindness that expresses itself and wants to express itself, and that we are really truly one in all that we do.
And we give thanks for this opportunity to reflect and to expand our ascending and expand our inclusion. For this, we give great thanks, and together we say,
And so it is.
and so it is.
I didn't think I was going to do that.
I know wonderful words flow out of you when you don't expect it.